Remember those old commercials warning about the dangers of too much sugar? Sticky fingers, hyper kids, and of course those dreaded cavities. Today we're diving deep into the story of how sugar went from a rare treat to a ubiquitous ingredient. It's everywhere. And we're going to unpack why that is.
It's a fascinating journey, one that spans centuries and touches on everything from global economics to human rights to the evolution of our own taste buds.
And get this, the average American eats about 71 grams of sugar per day. They're like eating 7 donuts every single day.
Wow.
We're going to trace the path of this sweetener from ancient sugarcane fields to modern grocery aisles and explore how we became a society hooked on sweet.
What's particularly interesting is how sugar transformed from a luxury for the elite to a mass-produced staple. That shift involved incredible ingenuity, but also dark chapters of exploitation that we can't ignore.
Let's start by going back in time to when sugar was a precious commodity, a symbol of wealth and status.
Imagine Europe in the Middle Ages. Sugar was this exotic ingredient brought in from the East at great expense. It was so valuable that it was used not just as a sweetener, but also as a decorative element in elaborate feasts.
I've heard about those extravagant sugar sculptures. It's hard to imagine considering how commonplace sugar is today. When did that shift begin?
Things started changing in the 1700s with the rise of sugar plantations in the Caribbean, particularly in Haiti. This led to a significant increase in production, which in turn drove down prices.
So sugar became more accessible to the masses. But how did it go from being available to being a must-have? Was it just the lower price?
That was certainly a factor, but savvy marketing played a key role as well. Companies like Cadbury, the chocolate maker, were pioneers in packaging and advertising. They understood the power of associating their sugary products with emotions like love and happiness, especially around holidays like Valentine's Day.
Those heart-shaped boxes of chocolates are definitely iconic.
Right.
It's incredible how these marketing tactics developed centuries ago still resonate with us today.
It speaks to the enduring power of associating a product with positive emotions. But while this was a period of innovation and expansion for the sugar industry, it's also when the dark side of the sweetness truly came to light. The boom in sugar production was fueled by the brutal system of slavery on those Caribbean plantations.
And this wasn't just hard labor. It was a horrific system designed to maximize profit at the expense of human life.
Sadly, that's accurate. Historians estimate that enslaved Africans working on these plantations had an average life expectancy of just 7 years. The conditions were so brutal, the labor so relentless, that it was actually cheaper for plantation owners to work people to death and replace them than to invest in even minimal care.
It's a chilling reminder that our craving for sweetness came at a horrific human cost.
Yeah.
One historian even referred to the system on these plantations as a proto-assembly line, emphasizing the cold, calculated efficiency with which human beings were exploited for profit.
That's a powerful image. And this system had ripple effects far beyond the Caribbean. The demand for sugar in Europe was so high that it directly contributed to the transatlantic slave trade and the unimaginable suffering of millions of Africans.
So from a luxury for the few, sugar became a commodity built on the backs of enslaved people. But the story doesn't end there. We're going to fast forward now to the American heartland in the 1970s, where a man named Duane Andreas and his company ADM would change the landscape of sweeteners forever. But first, we need to understand who Duane Andreas was and what made him such a powerful force in American agriculture.
Duane Andreas was a fascinating figure. He was the CEO of ADM, a giant in the agricultural industry, and a master of understanding both the business of farming and the world of politics.
He sounds like a man who always had his finger on the pulse of power, someone who knew how to make things happen.
Exactly. He had connections to presidents from both parties, knew how to work the system to his advantage, and was always looking for an opportunity. Some people have even compared him to Forrest Gump in the way he seemed to be present at so many pivotal moments in American history, from Watergate to the rise of ethanol.
It sounds like we're about to dive into the story of a man who understood how to turn corn into gold. What was his connection to sugar? Did ADM produce it directly?
Not quite. ADM's main focus was corn. They were masters of corn production processing and finding new uses for it. And that's where the story takes another intriguing turn. Remember the 1970s energy crisis? Gas prices were skyrocketing and there were long lines at the pumps.
I definitely remember those days. My parents were constantly worried about rising gas prices and the uncertainty of it all.
Well, Andreas saw this crisis as an opportunity. He pitched the idea of ethanol, a fuel made from corn, as a solution to President Jimmy Carter. And it worked. The government started subsidizing ethanol production, which was a huge win for ADM. They were already experts in corn, and now they had a new government-backed market for their product.
That's some incredible foresight and business savvy. But as I recall, those gas lines eventually disappeared. What happened to the demand for ethanol?
You're right, the energy crisis subsided and the demand for ethanol dwindled, but Andreas Ever, the strategist, had already pivoted to his next big idea, high fructose corn syrup. He had these ethanol factories, and he realized he could use the same facilities to produce this incredibly sweet, versatile, and inexpensive sweetener.
So the guy who was pushing corn-based fuel switched gears to corn-based sugar. That's some serious entrepreneurial thinking. But wasn't sugar already a dominant force in the food industry? How did he plan to compete with that?
That's where his political maneuvering comes into play again. He supported quotas on foreign sugar. On the surface, this looked like he was backing American sugar producers. But his real aim was to drive up the price of traditional sugar, making his high fructose corn syrup a more attractive option for food companies looking to cut costs.
So it was a brilliant double play. He got government support to create a sugar alternative, then made sure that alternative was the cheapest option on the market. But how did this impact the American diet?
That's what we'll uncover next as we explore the rise of high fructose corn syrup and its lasting impact on what we eat. Andreas's strategy with high fructose corn syrup was remarkably effective. It quickly became the go-to sweetener for a wide range of food and beverage companies.
It seems like it was a perfect storm. He had the product, the political connections, and the business acumen to make it all happen. But what about the consumers? Did anyone raise concerns about this new sweetener flooding the market?
There were certainly some voices of caution, particularly within the scientific and medical communities. Some researchers began to highlight potential health concerns associated with high fructose corn syrup, suggesting it might be metabolized differently than regular sugar and could contribute to issues like obesity and metabolic disorders.
That makes sense. Our bodies weren't exactly designed to handle such concentrated doses of sweetness. But did these concerns gain any traction? Did they impact consumer behavior?
Unfortunately, not to a significant degree. The food industry embraced high fructose corn syrup wholeheartedly. It was cheaper, easier to use in manufacturing, and it extended the shelf life of products. And let's be honest, it made things taste really, really good.
So convenience and taste won out over potential health risks.
It's a familiar pattern, isn't it? We see it time and time again with various food trends.
It speaks to the power of the food industry and its ability to shape our desires and habits. And this isn't a new phenomenon. Remember when we talked about the sugar plantations in Haiti and the horrific conditions there?
Of course, it's hard to forget such a stark example of exploitation.
Well, the Haitian Revolution of 1791 was a direct response to that brutal system. Enslaved Africans, using the very machetes they wielded to harvest sugarcane, rose up against their oppressors in a fight for freedom. It's incredible to think that sugar, something we often take for granted, was at the heart of such a pivotal moment in history. A literal fight for freedom, fueled by the desire to break free from the chains of sugar production. What impact did this revolution have on the sugar industry?
The Haitian Revolution sent shockwaves throughout the world. It was the first successful slave revolt in the Western Hemisphere, and it challenged the very foundation of the global sugar trade.
So did the world finally wake up to the horrors of sugar production and change its ways?
Unfortunately, not entirely. While the Haitian Revolution was a monumental victory for the Haitian people, it didn't end the global demand for sugar. Production simply shifted to other parts of the world, and the brutal cycle of exploitation continued.
It's a sobering reminder that even in the face of such powerful calls for change, systems of exploitation can be incredibly resilient and adaptable. But surely the revolution must have had some impact on people's perceptions of sugar. Didn't it spark any moral debates?
Absolutely. The Haitian Revolution, along with ongoing abolitionist movements, brought the issue of slavery and its connection to sugar consumption to the forefront of public discourse. Intellectuals and philosophers in Europe began to grapple with the ethical implications of their sweet tooth.
So people were becoming more aware of the problem. But did that awareness translate into any real changes in behavior? Did people stop consuming sugar?
It's a complex issue. Some individuals and groups did choose to boycott sugar or seek out alternatives. But for the vast majority, the convenience and pleasure of sugar outweighed the moral dilemma. Plus, the system itself made it difficult to escape. Sugar was, and still is, deeply embedded in our food systems and cultural practices.
It seems like awareness alone isn't always enough to overcome deeply ingrained habits and economic realities. But that doesn't mean those conversations were important. Did they have any lasting impact?
The debates sparked by the Haitian Revolution planted seeds of change that would continue to grow over time. For instance, even Voltaire, the renowned Enlightenment thinker, addressed the issue of sugar and slavery in his famous satirical novel Candide. He included a scene where the main character encounters a disfigured slave who vividly describes the horrific price of sugar production.
That's fascinating. So the connection between sugar consumption and ethical concerns has been present in our collective consciousness for centuries. But as we've seen, awareness doesn't always lead to action.
That's right. And in many ways, the challenges we face today with sugar are even more complex than they were in Voltaire's time.
In what way? Hasn't the abolition of slavery addressed the most egregious aspects of sugar production?
While the end of formal slavery was a critical step forward, the global food system is still rife with exploitative labor practices, and the rise of high fructose corn syrup has introduced a whole new set of concerns.
You're right. We were just talking about how high fructose corn syrup has become ubiquitous in our food supply. It's in everything from soda to bread to condiments. It's almost impossible to avoid.
And that's part of the problem. It's become so pervasive, so ingrained in our diets that we often don't even realize how much of it we're consuming. And that's not by accident.
What do you mean?
The food industry has become incredibly sophisticated in its use of sugar, particularly high fructose corn syrup. They figured out how to make it hyper palatable to trigger our cravings and keep us coming back for more. And just like those early marketing campaigns for sugar, the goal is to associate these products with positive emotions and create a sense of need.
It's like we've come full circle. From those early sugar sculptures designed to impress and delight, we've moved to a world where sugar is engineered to be irresistible, often hidden in plain sight within processed foods.
Exactly. And the consequences of this overconsumption of sugar are becoming increasingly clear.
I think that's a perfect segue into our next topic. The impact of all this sugar on our health. We've explored the history, the economics, and the politics of sugar. But what about the personal cost?
That's where the conversation gets really interesting. Because while we've focused on the journey of sugar from field to table, we also need to understand its journey from our mouths to our cells. And that's a story that's still being written.
So we've talked about sugar's journey, from fields to our tables. But let's zoom in even further. What happens when all that sugar gets inside us?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And with all this processed food and sugary drinks everywhere, it's no surprise we're seeing more and more health problems tied to too much sugar.
When you say health problems, what exactly are we talking about? What does all that sugar actually do to our bodies?
Oh, the list is long and it's not pretty. Obesity, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, fatty liver disease, even some cancers have been linked to eating too much sugar.
It's kind of scary to think something that tastes so good can be so bad for us. What makes sugar so harmful? What's happening inside when we eat too much of it?
Okay, so when you eat sugar, your body turns it into glucose, which is like fuel for your cells. But if you eat way too much sugar, your body can't keep up.
I see.
And that causes a spike in your blood sugar levels, which then triggers a release of insulin, a hormone that helps regulate blood sugar.
Okay, so far so good.
Yeah.
Where's the problem then?
Well, the problem is that over time, if your insulin levels are constantly high, your cells start to ignore insulin signals.
Oh, yeah.
And that's called insulin resistance. Basically, your cells become less responsive to insulin, which means glucose starts to build up in your blood, and that's when you start seeing all these health problems.
It's like a chain reaction, right?
No.
One thing leads to another, and it all starts with something as simple as a can of soda or a cookie.
Precisely. And the food industry, they're masters at playing on our love for sweet things. They've created a world where sugar is everywhere, making it that much harder to resist.
Yeah, it feels like we're up against our own biology, A&D, a system that's pushing sugar on us constantly. But we're not totally helpless, right? What can we do to break this cycle of eating too much sugar and protect ourselves?
Well, the first step is awareness. Understanding how sugar affects us and how the food industry hooks us, that's huge. Once you know that, you can start making different choices.
So what does that look like in everyday life? How can we actually cut back on sugar?
Cooking more meals at home is a big one. Using fresh ingredients, that way you control how much sugar goes in your food. And read food labels carefully, always checking for added sugars.
You're telling me. Sugar is hiding in the weirdest places. I was shocked to find out how much sugar is in some salad dressings and sauces.
It's sneaky, isn't it? And all those little bits of added sugar, they add up fast. Another good tip is to cut back on sugary drinks like soda and juice. They're basically sugar bombs with very little nutrition.
I know it's tough to give those up. I've been trying myself. But it's worth it for our health. What about things like artificial sweeteners or sugar substitutes? Are those okay?
There are a lot of options out there, but honestly, approach those with caution. There's some research suggesting that those artificial sweeteners could have their own long-term health effects.
Hmm. So moderation and being aware of what we're eating, yeah, that's the key. We got to pay attention to how much sugar we're consuming and make an effort to choose healthier options. But it goes beyond just individual choices, doesn't it?
Absolutely. This whole sugar thing is tied to bigger issues too, like how our food is grown, how it's marketed to us, and even economic differences.
What can we do about that? Can we make a difference on a larger scale?
There's a lot we can do. Support groups fighting for healthier food options. Speak up for policies that discourage eating too much sugar. Educate ourselves and each other about this whole complex issue.
So it's about taking action, both personally and working together to build a better food system.
You got it. And remember, even small changes can make a difference. Being mindful about what we buy and what we eat, and being informed citizens, it all adds up. We can help shift things away from this sugar overload towards a healthier way of living.
This has been a really eye-opening deep dive into the world of sugar. We've learned about its past, its influence on society, and its complicated relationship with our health. Hopefully this has given you some food for thought and some tools to make smarter choices about your own sugar intake.
Yeah, and more than anything, I hope it's sparked a curiosity in you about the food we eat and the systems that shape those choices. After all, the more we know about what we're putting into our bodies, the better decisions we can make. Decisions that align with our values and support our health.
Thanks for being with us on this deep dive. We'll be back next week with another fascinating topic chosen by you. Until then, stay curious.